treat people with kindness and decency and respect.
This is Zartan, and you're listening to Bravo Team. Yes, the Bravo Team.
Welcome to Bravo Team, our second G.I. Joe show looking at all the secondary G.I. Joe material. I am your host, Aaron Moss, codename Brotherhead. On this show, I'll either be by myself or have other guest hosts joining me, looking at all the G.I. Joe material out there. We'll be covering things like the toys, the Action Force comic, the European Missions comic, the movies, G.I. Joe Renegades, or anything else that is not G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero comic, or the 80s cartoon. Come, join us on our mission to stop Cobra from taking over the world. Yo, Joe.
Hey, Joes. General Head here. And I am not alone in the studio today. Today, I have joining me our friend from beyond the newest podcaster to the podcast universe, Brad Abraham. Hey, Brad.
Hey, Aaron. It's good to be here. I flew in as soon as I could. My wingman escorted me safely to land and shook off that pesky Cobra Night Raven in the process. So I appreciate and I salute him.
Very nice. Very nice. Great wingman. And before we get started, I do want to announce that today's episode is sponsored by Big Danny Cool and Sean Adams, both over on patreon.com. That's patreon.com/headcastnetwork. Thank you, Big Danny Cool and Sean Adams. I previously announced today we're going to look at issue 61 and one of the cartoons, but I realized I was behind on the special missions, and 61 leads into special mission 6. So I figured instead of doing that today, we would talk about special missions 5 to get us caught up. And I was going to get the other guys to join us, but yeah, everyone was busy with either family stuff or conventions or restraining orders or, all that nonsense. So
They have lives, in other words. That's what you're trying to say.
Basically, I have no
around
life.
that.
I have no life, and Brad, well,
no,
he's here with me today. So apparently that tells about he started podcasting on his own. So
yeah, I didn't want you to be alone. I figured somebody has to join you for this very
I appreciate you taking
special. It's a very special missions, and it's a very special issue. So it's going to be fun.
Yes, and I've talked about this previously over on Jared's Crusademus. A couple years ago, they had me on and I talked about this issue. So it's a great issue, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. This is Special Missions number 5. Cover date was June of 1987. The on-sale date, February the 27th, 1987. Cover price was $1. The title of this was called Showdown. Writer was Larry Hama. Artist, Herb Trimpe. Letterer, Philip Hugh Felix. Colorist, Bob Sharan. The cover artist was Mike Zeck, all alone. Just Mike.
Well, it's a Zeck. No baby, but Zeck. So it's great.
And the editor of this was Bob Harris. And this was reprinted, according to Mike's Amazing World, this was reprinted in Action Force number 43, 44, 46, 47, and 48. I don't know why it was reprinted in so many issues, one right after another, but that's what I'm getting from Mike's Amazing World. So, and before we get going any further, real quick, Heinz Koch has joined us in the chat. He says, "Hi, gentlemen." Heinz, glad you could join us, man. And anyone else that joins us, feel free to say hi and let us know you're out there.
Heinz joins us a lot on these, doesn't he?
Yes. Heinz is a good guy. I like Heinz. He's always joining us and giving us his 2 cents.
And as they say with Heinz, there are no other kinds. Sorry, Heinz, but I'm sure you get that a lot too.
And just like, look at the big brain on Brad.
Check out the big brain on Brad. You're a smart motherfucker. That's right.
Yeah, I get that a lot too. Yeah. Right before somebody steals my burger and my drink.
Well, as long as you don't put a bullet in your head, you're doing all right.
Yeah, so far, so good. So far.
The synopsis for this issue. First of all,
Warning!
new toy alert.
Warning!
This issue introduces the Night Raven and the Strato Viper. It's told from 2 different perspectives. Cobra is setting up the new Night Raven to scope out a potential Joe base. The Strato Viper is very obnoxious and dismissive of his ground staff as he blasts off. Meanwhile, the Joes have noticed Night Raven taken off, and they send Ace and Slipstream in their respective vehicles to try and remind Cobra not to get too close. If the Shadow Viper fires first, they are free to wipe him out. As Ace and Slipstream leave, they joke with the ground support team, spreading goodwill. After a little dogfighting, Ace gets knocked down in the drink, while Slipstream is able to take out the Night Raven. The Joe team shows up promptly to pull Ace out of the water. Meanwhile, the Cobras take their time, and when they finally get to the Night Raven, they find that it's sunk under the water. Looking for the pilot, one of the Cobras ditches the breakout toolbar into the ocean that he lifted from the cockpit, so the Strato Viper couldn't free himself. So that was Special Missions number 5. Before we go any further, let's look at the cover of this one. We get the Night Raven flying in the air. We get the Ace bailing out of his jets. We don't see Slipstream and the Conquest on here, but the Skystriker's going down in flames. Ace is parachuting free. It's got the reddish pink background with, it looks like Duke up in the corner box. So, Brad, what are your thoughts? Or actually, what are your thoughts on this cover?
Well, it's funny just looking at it now in front of me. It kind of mirrors the cover for issue 34, which is an all-timer, I guess the last full aerial combat issue in the G.I. Joe universe. And that one, if you recall, it had Ace and I think Lady J in the Skystriker kind of in the foreground, and a Cobra Rattler sort of firing on them and their plane being all shot to heck. So this almost feels like the next step where the plane's in flames and Ace is having to eject, only you have a Night Raven here. But, I mean, this is a really great cover. It's interesting. It's a Herb Trimpe special cover, isn't it? Because I know he illustrated this one. And he also illustrated the interior of this and pretty much almost every other issue of Special Missions. And
according to Mike's Amazing World, This cover was by Mike Zeck.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, this is a Mike Zeck cover.
Well, it's a Zeck. No baity, but Zeck.
Oh, okay. So. Then I stand corrected. Zeck is second best to Trimpe, I guess, as far as I'm concerned. Jared may disagree, but I know he'll agree if he's out there. Now, I think what separates this cover is it's got a real sense of color to it. The sky is sort of this pinkish red, sort of evening on the cusp of nighttime setting, and there's just a lot of great depth to it, particularly in the background. You can kind of see the ocean at the bottom of the frame, and you kind of have that curvature of the earth, and you got the cumulonimbus clouds and everything there. So it's a really dynamic cover. It's got a lot of action in it, and again, it shows Ace getting hit, and in a weird way it kind of set up a different story for me. The first time I saw it on the newsstand, I thought, okay, Ace gets shot down, he bails out over hostile territory, and he has to make his way back to the I guess behind, on the other side of the enemy alliance, on his side. And that's not really what we get in the story, but it does kind of fit that trope, that aerial combat trope. And I'm always a big fan of issues of this book that really focus on the aircraft over the ground stuff. I've always had a real affinity for air combat. You can't tell because I got my outer fleece over it, but I'm actually wearing an Avro Lancaster t-shirt that I bought in Canada the last time I was up there. And that was completely unintentional. I wasn't intending to wear a shirt with an airplane on it today because we're going to be talking about an airplane issue. So that was just a happy little coincidence. But I mean, it's a great cover. And again, as you said, the new toy alert, it shows off a new toy on the cover. So that also implies that we're kind of moving in a different direction. You could almost infer from the cover, as my last little point, that it's almost in a weird way representing sort of the next stage in G.I. Joe, where things like the Skystriker are being replaced by the X-30 and the Night Raven is coming along and replacing the Rattlers in a way. And Hasbro is trying to get us to buy the new toys and put the old toys on the shelf. So, it works on that level as well. So that's all I've got to say about this one.
Very nice. Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's a great cover. Like I say, great issue also, but we'll get to that. But like I said, I talked about this a couple years ago on one of Jared's Crusade-mas, and he asked me to come on. He's like, whatever issue you want to talk about, whatever comic. And, you're doing a G.I. Joe show if you want to bring a G.I. Joe comic on. And this is one of the ones I thought of because, when I think of Special Missions, this one and the next one are ones I really think about. So, the colors on this one, they pop. The reddish, pinkish sky in the background. Yeah, we get the new toy alert. We get this Night Raven flying above. Like you said, we got the Skystriker being blasted out of the sky. And, kind of like you were saying that, it's time to bring in the new toys and, how else to do it, but let's blow up the old ones. So they're blowing the old Skystriker out to make way for the X-23. And
I remember, speaking of segues, I remember on the Star Wars side of thing where they had a HasLab for the Mandalorian's ship. and they raised all this money. All these people bought into the HasLab for the Mandalorian ship, and in like the first or second episode of the new season, they blew the ship up, and people were angry. And I'm like, I can understand that, but I mean, blowing up the Death Star did not all of a sudden preclude or eliminate the need to have a new Death Star playset or new Death Star characters or anything like that. Or killing a character off in a movie doesn't mean their action figure is no longer valid. It just means you have to use your imagination and come up with new scenarios for your toy instead of just reenacting scenes from something you've already seen. But that's a completely different issue, and that relates to Star Wars, and we won't talk about it anymore. So
that's right.
Carry on.
Before G.I. Joe, I was into Star Wars. So
yeah, me too. Me too.
I'm sure a lot of us were.
Well, I think a lot of us kind of left Star Wars and jumped onto G.I. Joe around the same time. It was right around Return of the Jedi. There were no more movies, supposedly, and if you were 10 years old, 9 or 10 years old, you were looking for new toys. So a new toy, and G.I. Joe kind of came along and sort of scratched that itch and really carried on a long time. And the fact that we're still talking about it. Yeah,
here is 30, 40 years later. Yeah, we're still sitting here talking about G.I. Joe and reading the comics and playing with the toys. I mean, collecting the toys. And that's a lot about, the longevity of G.I. Joe.
Well, it's lasted. It has lasted. Yeah. If it was, it's lasted more than some of the other ones of the era. But, that's because it's cool.
Very much so. So, out of 1 to 5 Yo-Jo Colas, again, 1 being it sucks, 3 being average, and 5 being something that you want to hang on your wall, what would you rate this one?
You know what? I would give this one a 5. Issue 5 gets a 5 for me. It's a rare 5 for me, who is notorious for handing out 3s like they're going out of style. But
like it's average.
when you said hang it on the wall, I looked and said, if I had this one, it's got some nice color to it. It would look really great on a wall. And I think if I was to kind of go through and pick out some favorite covers, this one is definitely up there for me, at least.
And I was debating between a 4.5 or a 5, but after talking about it with you, I'm going for a 5 also. Because it's a great cover. Like I said, it's one I think about when I think about the special missions. So it rates a 5 also. And anyone in the chat, Heinz, and anyone else out there, feel free to drop your ratings or any thoughts you have on the issue, and I can read them on the air.
As long as it's also a 5. As long as it's also a 5. We were not going to accept any 3s here.
I won't accept a 4.5 on this one, but But enough about the cover. Let's talk about the insides a little bit. Real quick, we got a cover rating for Heinz. Cover's a 5 for sure. Good man, Heinz. Good man. You agree with us on the 5. So it's 5s all around. So, and I know it's a Zet cover, so Jared, we give it at least a 4 at the minimum. So I'm going to assume he's giving it a 5 also, even though he's not here. But it's a Zet cover. It's got, aircraft. It's got something from inside the issue. So on Jared's behalf, I'm giving it a 5 since he's not here to argue with me about it. So, Brad, do you have thoughts on the actual issue itself?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, like I said off the top, it's a Trimpe special, right? And I think what really separates special missions from the mainline book, and I've said this before, is that the great Herb Trimpe illustrated most of them. And I think in this issue, you really get a sense of what he brings to the equation. I think, and I'm pretty sure he and Larry had a very strong bond as writer and artist. And in fact, when I met Larry at the New York Comic Con back in, I think, 2010, Herb was tabling right next to him. So I got to talk to both of them, and they both signed my copy of issue 2, which I have in a frame in another part of the house. This issue, obviously, and I said this both from the cover and also the interior, feels a lot like a spiritual successor to issue 34, which I believe was titled Shakedown. Not the Bob Seger song, obviously, although that song kicks ass. But that issue was that classic one-shot of Ace and Lady J versus Wild Weasel and Baroness and the Skystriker Rattler, respectively. And they battle essentially to a draw. And that was just such a great issue. A nice palate cleanser, I called it, after the preceding 11 or 12 issues, which were kind of telling one continuous story. This kind of broke it up a little bit, and it really spotlighted the tech, both of the Skystriker, what it could do, and the Rattler, what it could do. Here we're a little different because we're spotlighting the next generation of Joe and Cobra aircraft. You got the Night Raven on the Cobra side, and you got the Conquest X30 on the other side. And the fact that Ace gets shot down in the Skystriker, that old classic, and it leaves Slipstream, the new guy, and the X30, the new jet, to battle the Raven, kind of sort of shows a little bit of that evolution of the Joe story and the Joe characters, that there's new technology, new pilots, new aircraft, new everything. But I have to say, during this issue, it does kind of mark a bit of a changing of the guard, because obviously Ace gets shot down, but he survives. But the Skystriker, as you pointed out, gets blown down in flames, and it's up to Slipstream to kind of save the day. But where this issue really stood out for me then and now, and I think it's pretty obvious to anybody who's read it, because it is its finest storytelling point, is the point of the story isn't so much the combat as it's how the Night Raven pilot and Ace and Slipstream respectively treat their ground crews and their support crews. And, if Jared were here, he'd certainly agree and point out that in the military, it truly is a team effort. And, I'm thinking if there's a brief little cutaway in Top Gun, the sequel, the recent one, Maverick, and where there's the other pilot, Goose, his kid, and they're all preparing for the big Act 3 raid. And there's some dialogue, and then Rooster goes to his jet to climb in. But before he does that, he stops and he snaps to attention and he salutes the grounds crew who prepped the plane. It's just a quick little shot, but it's a show of respect and admiration and appreciation. And that's demonstrated here, because the Night Raven pilot demonstrates absolutely none of this. He comes barging in, he flings a guy off the ladder, he steps on his hand, and he acts like an egocentric narcissist. I'm better than anybody else here, and get away from my plane. And he treats the ground crew like crap. And spoiler alert, he pays the price for that in a not very surprising, but very funny way. And then you contrast that with Ace and Slipstream. They come in, they say hi to the rescue crew in case they're going to be needed. Slipstream actually visited the child of one of the mechanics in the hospital and gave the mechanic a Transformers toy for the mechanic to give to his kid on his next visit, because it's going to look better coming from his dad than his dad's friend pilot, which is really really nice as well. And and it's just a really nice little bit of business at the beginning that really sets up the ending of the issue, because once they take off and everybody gets into a combat situation, everything goes haywire. And again, there's another little Top Gun homage to it on page 7 when Ace does the flip the plane over and fly above the Night Raven, so he can kind of pull a Maverick, and rather than giving him the bird or anything, he says, "Eat my dust," and rockets off. And then this whole battle kind of ensues. But the other thing I wanted to point out, though, and I've pointed this out previously with Herb Trimpe's art, is I read a book, the sort of a biography of him, and it's called The Incredible Herb Trimpe, and it talks about his background, and he was a pilot and a mechanic, and to supplement his income as a comic book guy, he had another job, and his job was repairing airplanes and doing maintenance on aircraft. So he'd been around aircraft much of his life, so he was very familiar with everything from how they look to how they work. And you kind of get that sense in special missions. Like, I almost want to wonder if Larry basically said, "Well, here's the basic action. You I'm not going to give you specific details on how many panels and everything. You just kind of do your thing, because you know this stuff." And you got to figure that aircraft, and any kind of hardware in particular in a comic book must be a real pain for artists to draw, because there's so much detail. And if you get something wrong, you're going to get some nerd in the letters column going, "Well, actually, that is incorrect." And speaking of nerd alert, I have to grudgingly direct attention to one little gaffe in the art, unless you caught it already and you want to talk about it.
I'm not sure, but if you want to go ahead and mention it, or if you want to wait and I'll mention what I've got, and if I don't mention it, you can mention it yourself.
Okay. In the name of suspense, to keep people listening, I'm not going to mention what it is, and we'll see if you picked up on it.
Right.
And if you do, great. If not, we'll come back to me and I'll reveal the mystery. But as it is, that's all I've got to say. This is an all-time great issue of Special Missions. It was Special Missions that was keeping me involved in G.I. Joe, and while I was kind of mentally disengaging with the mainline book, I was still buying it, but I was not quite as into it as I used to be.
Right.
Special Missions was the one that kept me going, and it was the one that a lot of my comic book reading friends who weren't necessarily into the mainline G.I. Joe book would either pick up on their own, or they would just ask to borrow my copy if they were over to read, because they really liked it and they really dug it. Especially, I feel like it's kind of Larry and to a degree Herb kind of sort of shaking the shackles of continuity off that they have to deal with on the mainline book and just telling simple little stories, little combat stories in special missions. And I think that was really the appeal for him, but it was also the appeal for those of us who read it, because it was nice to pick something up and not have to wonder where we left off, where we're going. It's just a simple story with a nice ABC progression, and I love it for that.
Yeah, very, very nice thoughts. And I'm glad you mentioned the Top Gun references, because I caught some of it, but I don't catch a lot of that. Because while I enjoyed Top Gun, it wasn't one of my favorites. And I know that if Kevin would have been here with us today, he would have been making the Top Gun references. I know that's a big one for him. So
he would have been on the highway to the danger zone, all issue and all episode long.
But yeah, no, you said a lot of what I thought about this issue. I'm gonna hold off on my gaffe I found. Again, hold that suspense off for a little bit, just because it's what I do. But it is a story about the pilots fighting the plane is the main story. But yeah, that's not the main story. It's how they treat their ground crew and how, like I said, they're a big team. And first about the fighting, I mean, it kind of shows that the Raven is maybe the better plane, because he took on 2 gijoe vehicles and he was able to take out the Skystriker. So maybe the Raven by itself is a better plane, even though the pilot's complaining about the entire time. There's all these problems with it. He was still able to take on 2 gijoes and take one of them out. So there is that. And like I say, yeah, we both kind of mentioned that, it's their way of sweeping away the older toys, getting rid of this Skystriker, and how, like I said earlier, how better to get rid of it, but to blow it out of the sky. So very nice. But yeah, the main story, though, is how the ground crew, is treated, and how the Joes and Cobras treat each other respectively. And how, and like you said, Jared would comment on this for sure. In the military, you're one big family. You have to rely on one another to get the job done. If anyone falls down on the job, as you see in this issue, you're going to have problems. The Joes, they're just a big happy family. Yeah, they went to the ground crew kids hospital because the father couldn't make it, and then he bought him a toy, a Transformer, which again kind of shows that to Larry, the Transformers is not in the G.I. Joe universe, even though they just finished up the G.I. Joe Transformers crossover not too long ago, which kind of made ties to each of the books. But so yeah, it's kind of that nebulous. Is it? Is it not? Like I've said before, normally I'm a big fan of keeping the different properties, different IPs separate. Though having said that, I'm liking what the Energon universe is doing currently with the books, but that's another story entirely. But I'll mention the gaff I found. Maybe it's the same one you found or not. When the toy is given.
Yep.
Yeah, he tells him it's the Jetfire, and he turns into a swing wing fighter. For anyone that's a Transformers fan, that is not Jetfire, and he does not turn into a jet fighter. He's given a Megatron,
who turns into a gun.
A rifle.
Not necessarily the thing you want to take to the hospital and say, "Hey, check this out," and transform it and set alarms off and everything. It might have sent the wrong message.
And up in a couple of issues, someone will write in commenting on that, and they'll give a no prize, saying that we'll get to it, I'm sure, when we cover that issue. But I want to say the no prize was along the line of that Slipstream's so busy he doesn't know popular culture, kids culture at the time, so he didn't know which one he got him.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was a comment from Larry or just a mistake somewhere with Herb not knowing. I don't know how where you saw Transformer, and then or where the disconnect was.
Yeah, the only other thing I thought of was it may have been an editorial who stepped in and said, "Well, wait a minute, you can't give a kid in a hospital a transforming toy gun and change it to Jetfire." It's probably easier to change the text of the words than it is to actually completely redraw the panel. They were on a tight schedule at this point, so they just said, "Okay, fine." And sometimes, errors happen. They do happen. They happen all the time. So you just kind of roll with them and go, "Okay, my bad," or Slipstream was mistaken, or he thought it was that one and he grabbed another one, and the mechanic was too polite to say, "Actually, this is Megatron, the leader of the Decepticons," and blah, blah, blah. Although I like to think of this page, I agree with you, as saying, you wanted a G.I. Joe Transformers crossover, you just got it. Here's a toy. It's a toy. Transformers are toys. G.I. Joe, that's real.
But I need to cover that G.I. Joe Transformers crossover at some point somehow. But I was going to do it on Bravo Team. We're busy with this kind of stuff. So,
yeah.
But yeah, no, it was, I say, but I do like how, we're talking about the Stratoviper, he comes all cocky and he's pushing people out of the way and he's, you stupid jerks, you guys aren't good enough to do this and da da da. And then, the entire time he's complaining about the jet, being faulty and this is wrong, that is wrong, and stupid, I'm going to chew him out when I get back and da da da. And I do like the foreshadowing at the beginning when they're in the jet and someone mentions, well, what is that? It's the breakout bar. In case something happens, they use the breakout. And then nothing else said about till the very end when the Stratoviper's looking for it. He's like, where's that breakout tool? Where do we go?
I was gonna say that, my friend, is what is known as setup and payoff.
Yes. Very much. I like the way Larry set it up. He's like, oh, here's the breakout bar. Don't worry about it. It doesn't come into play again. Oh, wait a minute. Where's the breakout bar in there? The one guy that took it, his friend's like, you better not let him see that. See what? And he tosses it out in the middle of the ocean.
in literary terms, instead of Chekhov's gun, it's Chekhov's breakout bar.
There you go. There you go. But it was great art. Herb Trimpe, one of the creators of G.I. Joe that started to help, with Larry did the comic to start with. As we've talked about, he does most of the special missions issues. And I do like the long run story, the continuity, one thing happening leading to another. But like you said, sometimes it's nice having these one-offs. And like we talked about last episode on the Real American Headcast, issue 60 was a one-off that we've already made our thoughts on that. So it's no spoilers.
I had lots of thoughts on that one.
It wasn't a great, I don't like saying this because I love Larry. I love his work. I think he's a fantastic writer. But issue 60 was a bit of a letdown as far as one-offs go. Where this one here shows how the one-off story can be done really well.
Yeah, and you got to really hand it to the guy because, just writing a comic book on a monthly basis is a lot because as soon as you finish it and you send it off to editorial, you gotta stick another piece of paper in the typewriter, or you gotta open a new file on your Mac or your Apple IIc or your whatever back in the day, and you got to start writing the next one. You got to constantly be thinking ahead, and then he does special missions on top of that. So he's got to do, a mainline issue every month, and then he's got to do a special missions one every other month. So it's a lot. Just being able to come up with ideas, and you have Hasbro throwing these new toys at you, and you're looking at guys like Crystal Ball and Big Boa and Raptor, and you're like, how the heck do I work these characters into the story that I've been writing for the last few years? But you got to do it. And then I'm sure Marvel's got its whole issues because G.I. Joe Real American Hero was one of Marvel's top titles at the time. And usually it's kind of like, you in film and television and just, creative work in general, it's like you want to be successful, but you don't want to be too successful, because once you become too successful, that's when everybody on the C-suite executive level thinks, well, obviously I can make it better. And then you get more people coming in and paying attention to you. Whereas if you're doing well enough that you're earning money, profit for the company, there's this attitude of just leave them alone and let them do their thing. It's the book's selling great. Let's just not start messing with it. Let's not put, Poochie into it or something like that and just kind of ruin it, or bring in the Great Gazoo or something like that and say, or let's give them magic powers and let's bring the Transformers into it because people like Transformers. That means they'll like this too. And I'm sure there was some back and forth battles behind the scenes. And I'm with you in that I don't really like crossing the streams in Ghostbusters terminology, even though, like you, I have been enjoying the Skybound universe of Transformers, G.I. Joe, Void Rivals. I've been enjoying that a lot. So when it's done right, and it can be done very well, but when you've already got an established continuity, an established world with established rules like G.I. Joe, once you bring Transformers in to the mainline book, it kind of throws everything off the rails. So I'm glad that never ever happened in the continuity of G.I. Joe Real American Hero. They never brought the Transformers actually into G.I. Joe, because that would have just been silly.
When we get to the 100, you may want to avoid a couple episodes.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about. I know which ones you're talking about.
And I've got some specials I'm going to be working on. I guess you may want to avoid also, but that's another story entirely. But I agree with you. And I'll talk about it when I actually do those episodes. But I enjoyed the first G.I. Joe Transformers crossover to an extent. But I prefer to keep them separate. And I think part of the problem is with that is that Larry has set this up as a more again, realistic. I don't like using that word with my comics because I'm talking about, Firestorm or, Superman or, people with powers and things that don't happen in real life. But Larry's G.I. Joe was more realistic, where the cartoon, I could see the Transformers popping up because there was a big divide between the two.
I cannot believe that they never attempted that back in the day when the cartoons were on the air, because they were both Sunbow, Hasbro, Marvel things. And I'm wondering why somebody didn't say, what would be a really great idea? Let's do an animated G.I. Joe Transformers crossover, either a movie or a bunch of episodes. I think that would have done stupid amounts of business because it would bring the two fandoms in, and it would be consistent within the comic book, not the comic book world, the cartoon world. Because in the G.I. Joe cartoon, they went into space and other dimensions, and there were dinosaurs and all sorts of weird stuff, and
giant germs.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure. It's going to be a while before we get to it, but when the walls of continuity were broken down, and when the Real American Hero book, even though at that point I think they were calling it G.I. Joe starring Snake Eyes and Ninja Force or something.
It was like Snake Eyes featuring G.I. Joe.
Yeah. But did they ever hand wave that away after the fact? Like say, it turned out it was some weird psychological warfare operation. Everybody was impacted by some ray by the ghost of Dr. Venom or something like that made everybody hallucinate that they were seeing giant transforming robots, or did it just get ignored? Because it's one of those things, especially when they jumped over to I think IDW, when they relaunched and continued Real American Hero after the Marvel run, if they ever addressed it or not. I don't know.
I don't remember in the main G.I. Joe book itself after it happened if they ever addressed it again. I think they ignored it, but I know that when Larry's restarted G.I. Joe, I've been reading those books, and I don't think he's mentioned the Transformers at all since he rebooted it with IDW. So
they hand waved it away. It never happened.
Yeah,
those issues are hard to find. Those later run issues are hard to find because people who bought them didn't keep them. They just gave them away. They said, "Here, I gave these to my nephew. He's 3. They're completely they're confetti now. They're completely shredded. They're hard to find, and people aren't really actively tracking it down. Although they will arrive in reprint form at some point when those big omnibus collections get into the next little run of books.
I'll probably buy the trade paperback, so the soft cover.
Probably.
I have an addiction.
Will. But you do, and I think I have them. I think I have the single issues of the first 141 or 142 of the Marvel books that I managed to grab over the years. After that, they get really difficult to find and really expensive. And even the I have the final 10 or so collected in that soft cover trade edition. Even that thing is going for hundreds of dollars online. I should consider selling it and just grab the omnibus when it comes out, because
there you go.
I'm considering that anyway for some of my show comics, because there's space considerations here. Anyway, we're really off course here. We really, we're flying out into the Atlantic and everything. We got some sort of weird. There's like a leak in our suit, our pressure suit, and we're having hyper high. We're hallucinating. We got to turn back. Yes. Turn back.
G.I. Joe Special Missions number 5.
That's what we're doing, right?
The only Transformers crossover is a mislabeled Transformer toy. But yeah, no, it was a great issue. I love, like I say, the dog fighting portion was great. But like we've talked about, I think the interaction, the beginning and the end, the interaction between the Joe and the ground crew and the Strato Viper and his ground crew is the main part of the story. And, 'cause that's what sets it up. And that's how it ends, They're quickly rushing to get Ace out of the water. Meanwhile, the Cobras are like, we go fast. We push out. We don't want to tax the system. We don't want to rush. We don't mess up the system or anything. We'll get there when we get there.
Pull over, grab some donuts. I gotta use the can. Hang on a second.
Time for a beer stop.
Yeah. Or I like to think them saying, no, we have to do everything by the book. We have to do the pre-flight check and everything. We have to do a walk around of the plane. We have to make sure, all this other stuff. We got to test fire the engines. We're, dragging their feet.
maybe if he had been a little nicer to the ground crew, they may have actually, put a little effort into rescuing them. But
Well,
that's
that is a great lesson. That is a great lesson, and I kind of wish more people in the world now would take that lesson to heart. Don't treat the help, don't treat the the minimum wage service workers like they're under gum to be scraped off of your boot. Treat people with kindness and decency and respect, and everything's better. And sometimes you'll get some actual benefit from that, not just by not shouldn't be the reason to do it, but
right.
sometimes. I mean, I can think of many times where I've just struck up a conversation with the guy at the rental counter when we were in New York renting a car, and and he knew me by name and what I looked like, and he always gave me some sort of deal on something, other free tank of gas or a free upgrade to a better vehicle. This is the New York time, so we didn't own a car, but we would rent them occasionally, and every time you'd always get something, and just by going in and not being a jerk to like a lot of people did.
Right.
Being all demanding, where's my car? Where's this? Why is this? Blah 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 blah. And you just be chill about things and treat people with some respect and everything. And even if you don't get anything directly out of that, you've probably made that person's day a little better because they've had to deal with any manner of things. When I was doing I had to do a bunch of customer service nonsense with FedEx over the holiday because they'd lost a package that I'd sent, and I didn't berate them. I just said, hey, this is what's going on, and they tried to figure it out and everything, and I just would ask them how their day was, and it didn't really make a big difference because they never found my package, but at the same time it at least it didn't add to whatever stresses they were under. So that's what you can learn from this book. Don't let your parents say comic books are junk. You can learn valuable things from them.
Yes, very much so. But compared to the last issue of G.I. Joe we covered, this is another standalone story. And this would have came out the same month or right around that time. Maybe it actually came out the month before because it was by month at the time. So, but there's two standalone stories right next to each other. One showing how it's done proper, one how it's not so good. But and I don't like disparaging Larry because I love his work he's done. But everyone has their off issue or their off day or their off whatever it may be. And especially, you've got to hand to Larry, doing a monthly book, like you said, doing this one for now every other month. Soon it'll be monthly, and trying to, fit to the wishes of both the Hasbro and the Marvel overlords wanting to do what they want done in their time schedules, and Hasbro saying, well, we need these new toys featured. Okay, that's stupid. Well, I'll do it anyways, except for when it really comes to shove, but.
Yeah, and really, I mean, how lucky was Hasbro to have Larry and Herb and all these artists and colorists and letters and creators, and just have them involved. Like, these weren't, it was infamously the title that nobody really wanted to work on, and Larry said, I'll do it, and reworked a different pitch for it. And I think that they were quite fortunate that the stories have endured, and it's almost going through a bit of a renaissance right now with the omnibus, and the G.I. Joe property, with the omnibus, with the Skybound Energon Universe books, and the classified line. Like, I think the classified series line has really kind of reinvigorated the property. So
there's the G.I. Joe role-playing game, and the Axis and Allies G.I. Joe game, which I picked up recently for myself.
Yeah, and then there's the the rumor or the threat of a Transformers G.I. Joe movie, but it's still out there. And I think as long as we Gen Xers are still breathing and still buying things like that, they'll keep it going. And I think they're also kind of doing a good job of attracting a newer breed, a younger audience too, which I know has always been the goal. And
that's why I wonder
continues.
If they are attracting newer readers, or if it's up to us older people that's keeping it up. Because,
well, I think the first, not the first, but I know that the Skybound books have been selling really well. Like,
they did a reprint of the first issue.
Yeah, unless everybody who's buying them are all aging Gen X types like us, which is possible.
And that's what I'm wondering if it's us that's supporting it, or if they are because and that's one thing we've talked about before. I wonder because they've got the classified toys, but it's hard to find those in the store, at least where I'm at. And yeah, they're $20+ for the figures.
Yeah. But when you say they're hard to find, is that hard to find because they're not being stocked, or are they hard to find because people keep grabbing them off the shelves? Because
I think because they're not being stocked.
Well, I don't know because I
maybe your area. I don't know.
Well, this is all anecdotal.
Right.
But the closest target to me is near my wife's office, and occasionally she'll want a lift into work. I work from home, so I'll give her a lift, and it's early enough in the morning. Sometimes I'm like, well, I'm passing by the Target. I'm just going to pull in and take a little walk around and take a walk through and see what there is. And there was a time I went in there, and they had a lot of stuff. Like they had a whole little area where it was just G.I. Joe stuff, and they had several of the Raptor figure. They had the 60th anniversary soldier and diver, and they had a bunch of the retros. They had like multiples of Cobra Commander and the Cobra Officer and Duke, Recondo, Scarlet, and Stalker. Like they had a whole bunch. Whether they had just been put on the shelf that morning or late that night, they were out there. But then like a few days later, we had to go to Target to grab some things, and I went to the section and they were all gone. So within a few days, somebody had picked them up. Either somebody had bought all of them, or a reseller had grabbed them all and is going to try and unload them online and stuff like that, or whatever, which is also a possibility. But I always wonder about that. Is it a stock issue, or is it they actually do get stocked and they just
I think it may be a little bit of both. Depends on where you're at. Because I'm always checking the Targets and Walmarts, and Target, I usually have a little better luck at finding them than I do at Walmart. In fact, there's not even a shelf spot at Walmart, my local Walmart.
I haven't found anything. The only thing I ever found at Walmart was in the clearance section, a huge pile of Lady Jays. So, but I don't even know if Walmart has pegs for G.I. Joe for whatever reason.
Yeah, the ones local to me don't even have pegs for them anymore. They used to.
Yeah.
Then when they did one of their store revamps, they removed the pegs for them. Yeah, you don't even have pegs for them anymore. So
yeah.
That's why I don't know where the fault lies, but and again, they're $20+, and a lot of parents don't want to spend that for their younger kids. Where
but us older kids are a different story. $20 for now it's more like 20. Now it's more like $24, $25 for.
Oh yeah. I was going to say 20+. So depends on the figure. Yeah, it could be up to even $30, $40. Depends on which figure it is. But
well, there comes a point when you have to tap out. I guess I say to myself, if they go above $30, I don't really buy that many of them. But that's the moment where I go, okay, I think I'm done. I've got enough.
See, I'll spend that on the dual packs. If there's 2 figures or the 2 or 3 figure packs, or one of the bigger ones. But yeah, I wouldn't pay that much for the regular figures. But
I want them to do, if Hasbro is listening, which I'm sure they are, I want them to do battle packs. I want them to do accessory packs like they did for the 3 3/4 inch line. Yes. I want like a thing that's got different helmets, like some of the night vision goggles, and it's just stuff that they've already got, but put them in there and throw a few extra things in there. Star Wars did that, and G.I. Joe did that, and those are always really cool because when weapons got lost or broken or whatever, or you just wanted to kit them. I mean, I think the G.I. Joe classifieds do a good job of giving you lots of options to customize. If it's a soldier-based figure like a Dusty or a Recondo or a Duke, even, that you have some options as to how to customize them. But we've veered off course again. We've completely overshot the runway, and now we got to circle around. There's some clouds moving in. We gotta wait for clearance. There's a big hulking C-130 taxiing for takeoff, so we're in a holding pattern right now. We got to bring this in.
Well, thank you for getting us back on track there, Brad. I'm terrible at that. But anyways, unless you've got anything else to say about the actual comic special missions, I mean, I think, we've gone around and around and talked about, the comic and Transformers and toys and all this other stuff. So
because Kevin's not here, Kevin always likes to spotlight an ad in the issue. And there are some really good ones in this one. On the back cover, there's an ad for the laser tag official game handbook, because apparently you needed a handbook to figure out how to point the little gun at somebody else and press the trigger and have the little alarm on their chest go off. So that's fun. And there's some other great little ones in here too. There's a ad for the Nom in place of the letters column on this issue, which is the Nom, The Way It Was, which had launched right around this same time as this one. And that was a fantastic book that we've all spoken quite highly of here. But I want to point out an ad on, I guess, page 8 of the ad book, the opposite page 9 of the Skystriker Going Down. It is an ad for the movie Thrashin', which says hot, reckless, totally insane. Thrashin', the skateboarding movie, which was coming out on videocassette, starring Josh Brolin, who I have to say the movie is an amusing slice of mid-80s Velveeta. But, Josh Brolin has had one heck of a career as an actor, from the Goonies and Thrashin' to an Oscar nomination for No Country for Old Men to American Gangster and True Grit and Dune. So good on him. I mean, making the transition from child actor to adult character actor is no easy feat, and I've always really dug him. And my question for you is, I wonder what G.I. Joe character he could convincingly play, speaking of segues.
Very nice. Nice segue. At this point in time, I'm thinking maybe Hawk.
Yeah.
The elder state, because he's an older guy now. He's played Cable. He's played Thanos. I think he played that elder statesman. I think he could play a good Hawk, I think
he could play a good Hawk, or if they went the General Flag, he could play a great General Flag. And just as a regular Joe, I could see him as a really great Wild Bill. Probably a different take, less of a Yahoo type guy, but as like a Texan, with the hat and the mustache, I could see him pulling it off.
Yeah, I could see that. I was thinking, but put a mustache on and a hat and give him that cowboy accent. Yeah, I think he could actually. Yeah, I think I have to agree with you on that one. Very nice.
Yeah, definitely General Hawk. When they cast the G.I. Joe Transformers movie, that's not going to happen because those things don't cross over. Maybe somebody wants to approach Josh Brolin and say, "Hey, Josh,
if anyone's involved with it's listening."
Yeah, I mean, he was born in the late '60s. He was coming of age when G.I. Joe was a thing. He may be a fan. He may be sitting by the phone waiting for someone to offer him a role in a G.I. Joe movie. So let's
Josh
see
Brolin, if you're listening to this podcast, reach out to whoever's in charge of doing that crossover and mention your name.
Yeah,
let them know you'd be interested in doing it.
Definitely. Throw your 10-gallon hat into the ring.
And if anyone that's involved with the G.I. Joe Transformers franchise movie wise is listen to this podcast, pick your phone, give Josh Brolin a call.
Yeah. Come on. I mean, if you're going to make a G.I. Joe Transformers movie, do it right.
Yes. I won't get into that. Anyway, so unless you have any other thoughts on Special Missions number 5.
I don't know. Do we
because they are listening. I don't want to piss off anyone and make any further comments on that. But
there's degrees of that, though, Aaron. I mean, there's gentle ribbing, and then there's really, really irritating people by saying you don't like Zartan and Raptor and
no one would say that.
And the Glimmer Twins and all that other stuff. But no, I think the only thing I'm gonna add is this is a really great issue, and really all the Special Missions stories are great stories. I can't really recall one that I was disappointed in. Even ones that sometimes got a little out there, or they're a little weird. They kind of do some strange stuff that you don't quite expect. They're always done really well, and it's very much this kind of meat and potatoes old school comic booking with Larry Hama writing and Herb Trimpe illustrating. It's a great combination, and definitely check them out when you can, and if you can.
I agree. And again, anyone that's out there watching this on the YouTube lands, hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. We're normally here the 4th Sunday of the month talking some G.I. Joe. And I'm trying to work in a time to get a second airing on so we can do Bravo Team and the regular show. So watch for that. The 3rd Friday of the month, I'm normally here doing my unboxing reviews of the toys, of the classified figures. I've been doing a G.I. Joe, a Transformer figure, and then a G.I. Joe. Just again to have the G.I. Joe versus Transforming. Anyway, but hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. Also, feel free to give us a call at 1-559-500-3182. You can leave a voicemail there. That's 559-500-3182. Leave a voicemail. I can play that on the air. You can also, like I say, check out the websites, headcast.headspeaks.com, where all my shows are at for all of my stuff. Right now, the 2nd Thursday of the month, I'm releasing my G.I. Joe, a Real American Headcast. The 3rd Thursday of the month, I'm releasing a Energon Protocols, which is the role-playing game where Eric and a handful of us guys get together and play G.I. Joe, and I'm releasing them as a podcast. the fourth Thursday of the month, I release this show, The Bravo Team. Right now, we're just looking at the special missions, and we'll probably be doing that up through the end of the special missions because soon it's going to be going monthly. But be watching for all that. And Brad, if someone had recently started a podcast, by the time this comes out, your podcast came out last month, I believe, because this will come out in February. So, anyways, if someone started a podcast recently, what would be the name of it? And where can they go?
That would be the Celluloid Heroes podcast. Right now on Spotify, rolling out to other platforms very soon. Yeah, I realized I was the only regular on this podcast who didn't have his own podcast. Anytime there's the roll call at the end, it's, Kevin goes on and on about his 20 or 30 different podcasts, and Jared goes on about his 10 or 12, and Dave and everybody else has a podcast, and I wanted a podcast too, so I started my own podcast. It is a deep dive look into 50 key films of the Gen X era, what I like to call the Gen X era, in which I basically just tell the story of these movies, the experience of seeing these movies for the first time in the theater, and just kind of how they shaped Gen X culture, how they shaped my life. It's going to be fun, and it's also, I guess, as best as I could call it, a limited podcast because I'm only going to be covering 50 films. Maybe a few extras here and there, maybe some bonus stuff depending how it goes. But the first 2 episodes came out in January. First is a little prologue, just sort of laying down the premise of the podcast. And then the first full episode is about seeing Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey on a re-release in 1982 and how it truly blew my mind. And this month's issue, this month being February, is going to be a look at a little film you may have heard of called Star Wars. So that's going to be a lot of fun as well. And then from there, we're going to,
I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah, I know some of these movies get pretty obscure, but I will be covering a lot of fun movies. Some movies you've definitely heard of. Some you may not be quite as familiar with. Some movies you may not even be aware were released in the theater to begin with. And in that case, I'm talking about the theatrical versions of Battlestar Galactica and Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, both of which played in Canadian theaters months before their TV debut. And I saw both of them in the theater, and there are separate episodes on Buck and Battlestar coming as well. So
I think I saw Buck Rogers in the theater, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, maybe. It's
possible. It's been a while. I'm pretty sure I saw it.
I do my research on these, and the story behind Battlestar and Buck going to theaters is actually a really interesting one. So if any of this is of any interest to anybody out there listening, please swing by, check out the show, like and subscribe, leave a note. If you want to reach out to me directly and tell me what I'm doing right and doing wrong, best place for that is actually my website, bradabraham.com. I'm not much of a social media guy. I've tried to be, and it's just not for me. It's like New Country. I've listened to it. I just can't get into it. I'm the old school Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings type of rebel rock country. So reach out to me on my website and you can comment there. I always respond, and we've got a nice little community of people in the commentariat. So it's a lot of fun. And I post show notes on the podcast on my website as well. So there's show notes for the current 2001, which has got little clips, like YouTube clips, video clips from the stuff I've sourced, and just some background on the different places, the different theaters that I saw these movies in, some of which are still here, some of which are not. So kind of building a little bit of an archive there. So bradabraham.com for that. Celluloid Heroes, the podcast, the Celluloid Heroes podcast is the full name on Spotify, moving out to other platforms soon.
Very nice. Yeah, definitely check out Brad's show. And I'm glad that peer pressure has finally gotten to you and you decided to join the rest of us podcasters and become a full-time podcaster.
I'm still not 100% on board with Raptor, but I can be pressured into many things, as we will inevitably find here.
I will keep pressuring you on Raptor.
Yes, indeed.
As we talked about as we talked about on the last main episode or main show, I love the goofy stuff, but yeah, Zanzibar, I'm not sold on that one.
That's a line too far. Raptor isn't, Zanzibar is.
Raptor's fine. Zanzibar, okay, maybe not. But, anyways, that's enough about that. Remember, join us here next month when we will probably be talking about issue 61 and the cartoon. I forget what it was called now. I just watched it and I forgot the name of it already. The Pit Viper, I believe it was, or Pit of Vipers or something like that. But anyways, join us next month here on the YouTube when we talk about some more G.I. Joe in the cartoon, and be watching when I slip in a second recording so we can do the Bravo teams every month also. But until next month, remember, knowing is half the battle. Yo Joe.
Thank you for listening to Bravo Team, a supplementary G.I. Joe, a Real American Headcast show. Be sure to check out our main show, the second Tuesday of the month, G.I. Joe, a Real American Headcast, where I talk about the G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero comic book series read by Larry Hama, and the G.I. Joe cartoon from the 80s. Be sure to like us on Facebook. Check out our Facebook page. Just search for G.I. Joe, a Real American Headcast, under both Facebook and over on Twitter. We're also over on Google+. Be sure to rate us and to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast from. And be sure to write in and let us know how we're doing. We love hearing from fans. You can write to us at bravoteam@headspeaks.com. You can also send an MP3 file in and we'll play that on the air. You can send that to bravoteam@headspeaks.com. And be sure to check out my other great shows on the Headcast Network, Headspeaks, Task Force X, and the Starman Manhunter Adventure Hour, plus possibly more in the future. Also, be sure to check out the podcasts of my co-hosts. They have some great shows. And if you want to appear on this show, definitely let me know. I'm always up to speaking to new people. You can send me a Facebook message, or you can send us an email to bravoteam@headspeaks.com. Be sure to check out our website. The main site is at headspeaks.com, but you can check out the website for this show at gijoe.headspeaks.com. Be sure to join us here monthly for another great podcast. Until next time, Joe's dismissed.